Hello and welcome to a new video. This video is mostly going to comprise of this screenshot from the game Obduction, which I'm going to be giving my thoughts on. So if you want to listen to this as like a podcast while you're reading or doing homework or jerking off or whatever, that's about as good of a use for this video as, just watching it and staring at the screen. I have purchased this game about a day or two ago because I heard a few interesting things about it. It was made by the same developers as Myst and Riven, which are two fairly well-known point-and-click puzzle games with very adventurous and surrealist elements to their environment. And sure enough, Obduction follows that quite well. In this picture itself, you see this sort of 1950s white picket fence suburban home, isolated, like practically lifted out from Earth itself by some unknown force and plopped down on this alien world with giant purple structures and weird rocks. And the first world is very much like that, an amalgamation of different areas and things from different time periods. So yeah, that piqued my interest. That seems like a very interesting game to play, and it's a puzzle game. I'm not the biggest puzzle fan out there, but I do enjoy a good puzzle game every now and then. So I said, hey, $30, but I'll get it. Now, I tend to speak in a monotone, so maybe my tone of voice might betray me, but I didn't like it, and I would hope that's at least a little bit evident by how I sound. Right now I have the Steam review I left of the game open on a different tab to use as reference, but I'd like to go over the problems I have with the game. And a lot of it comes down to tedium and lack of any reasonable direction. And for the last part, I do want to clarify, I'm not asking for the game to hold my hand or for me to be able to press a button and magic light shows me where I'm supposed to go and shows what buttons I'm supposed to press. No. But the previous games that these developers have made are notoriously difficult to people. They can be confusing and mysterious and can take some time to navigate through. And I think a large part of that might be because of the whole point-and-click nature of the game, where you don't necessarily know if what you're clicking on is supposed to lead you somewhere, or it's just going to click empty space and not do anything. But I think that the developers have taken that whole idea of being difficult to heart far too much to the point where it was detrimental to some of the game, and I'll go into that. But first I want to talk about the tedium, and that is the game's biggest flaw ultimately. It's kind of hard to figure out where to begin with tedium, so we'll use the Steam review I left. I've listed out a few things in the review that I'll expand upon here. The first thing I listed was the running speed. The character has two speeds, walking and running. I will break my cynicism here and give the developers some credit. I do absolutely like the idea that they had to have caps lock be like a permanent run button, where rather than holding WSAD and the shift key at the same time, you can press caps lock, just use WSAD, and you'll be going at a running speed. That was an excellent idea, and so good, I even went to the Scorn Kickstarter page and left a comment on it asking the developers if they would be able to implement that, because the game has very similar maneuverability to Obduction here, so I figure it would fit right in. So, good job on that. What I don't like is just how utterly slow the running speed is. It could barely be described as a power walk speed. I could run faster than that, and I'm not even that athletic. And there's quite a few odd glitches when it comes to running, and I do believe these are glitches. The first one is if you're running forward holding W, but you're also holding left or right, so A or D, your character will run in a diagonal and the speed will be noticeably faster than the standard just hold W running speed. So if you are playing the game, you will probably find yourself awkwardly running at an angle rather than just running forward, because it shaves off a little bit of time from getting to point A to point B. Another glitch, and I do believe this is a glitch, is if you're holding WSAD and you're also holding the accompanying arrow key on the keyboard, your character will absolutely haul ass and move like super quick. I think it's even accumulative, like the longer you hold it, the faster the character goes over time. I say this is a glitch because, stop doing your homework and jerking off and try it out. Put one hand on your keyboard, on WSAD, put another on the arrow key. What hand do we have to use a mouse? We can't turn. We have to run forward, stop, turn with the mouse, run forward, stop, and so on and so forth. So, movement definitely could be better. Like, a lot better. A faster running speed, if nothing else. Another problem I've had with when it comes to movement is the odd collisions that can happen. Now, this game has some wonderfully detailed environments. It truly does take you into a surreal world. But your character is not fit to explore anything. Your character will frequently collide with the walls, like protrusions from the walls you wouldn't even think are there, and stop. Your character is unable to climb a small height difference from the ground he's on, or descend any heights different. It has to be like a perfect ramp, or the character isn't able to explore, isn't able to climb up that or descend that. For the first level, which is this very spacious environment, that's not too bad, but the second and third levels are incredibly linear. They are essentially these small, narrow passages where where a lot of the time you don't really have any room to move left or right. But if you're too far to the left or too far to the right, you very easily risk running into something and stopping and have to get yourself out of that. I do think that better designing of the environment and collision detection would have gone a long way. I also think that better designing of the second and third levels overall would have gone a long way. The first level, this desert area, is an alright place because as you progressively, solve the puzzles and get further along, you open up shortcuts. So where it might take you quite a while to get across a map, you now have a shortcut that gets you a little bit faster. Then later on you have an even better shortcut, and later on it's not even that big of a deal to get from one side of the map to the other. That's great. But again, the second and third levels are linear. They are essentially straight lines. So you are going to essentially be running along this straight line that can take several minutes in order to get from point A to point B. And then you'd likely have to run all the way back to do something else. And then you'd have to run all the way back again to finish a puzzle or whatnot. They really should have implemented better shortcuts, especially in the second level, where you are expected to go front and back, between areas of the level and not just keep pushing forward. Now, there are technically shortcuts in the levels, but it's more like shortcuts that close a loop rather than get you from point A to point B faster. It's kind of hard to explain, but imagine like there's almost a complete circle, and the shortcut is on one end of that circle that slowly drops you off on the other end of that incomplete circle, and that's what you have for it. I just don't think it was very fun having to traverse this linear, awkward environment with a slow character and limited mobility over and over and over again, trying to figure out what to do next for hours at a time. Some of the puzzles kind of suck. I'll start out by giving you a puzzle I actually liked. Now, within the first level, you see this tower throughout it, but you can't access it for until close to the end. But you see this tower standing up, and eventually you get a code to get into it, and you're able to get into the second floor. The tower has I think 4 floors. The first floor is the basement. The second floor is this sort of mayor's office for the civilization that briefly or extensively, I guess would be more accurate, existed within this surreal area. The third floor has, items or whatever you need to progress further on. And the fourth floor shows you how much progress you're making with the general story, which I won't get into. But you need to get to the third floor, but you can't use the elevator quite yet. You actually need to open the third floor from the outside door using its own key access thing. Now, the one for the second floor was sort of a standard key code thing. You type in the numbers. Like if you ever have a garage door opener, if you ever seen those, that's basically what it is. The second one, or the third one, is actually kind of interesting. Rather than press numbers, it's this rotary phone that's been jury-rigged to do the same thing. If you ever seen a rotary phone from, I don't know, like maybe your grandmother's house or an old movie or video game taking place in the past, it's like there's this circle with smaller circular holes in it, and you put your finger in the hole corresponding to a number like 3, then rotate the whole thing clockwise. Just look it up if you don't know what it is. And on this rotary phone, there's no numbers or letters like you would expect from it. There's usually numbers written on it and the accompanying letters, like 1 has A, B, C, 2 has D, E, F, and so on. It's also what was on the keys for cell phones before smartphones came out. Now, the start to completing this conundrum is in the second floor that you already can access, this sort of makeshift mayor's office. And on the desk of the mayor's office is a book, a compass, a box with a name written on it containing another compass, and a license plate. You look inside the book, and among the writing, which is normally in black, there's a bit of writing in blue that talks about the password for the third floor. And it says if you want a hint for what the password was changed to, look under the guidance of the first mayor. Now, in that same room is a list of names of all the previous mayors and what year they, ran the community for. I don't remember the name of the first mayor, so I will just call him Bob. You look at the list and you see Bob as the first mayor. His years are the lowest. And then you notice on the desk, hey, I've seen that name before. That's the very same name as that box on the mayor's desk next to the compass. And so you click the box with the word Bob on it, the first mayor's name, and the character sort of holds up a compass. And he doesn't actually hold it up, it's just sort of floating in midair like amnesia or whatever. Now, the compass is kind of useless. It doesn't stop at any direction. It doesn't point north. It just sort of rotates awkwardly and endlessly. But the hint said under the guidance of the first mayor. If the compass is a guidance, then what's under it? You rotate the compass, you manipulate the object and rotate it to show its bottom, and on it is a note taped to it with the letters DC, the initials, I should say, DC. And this sort of stumped me for a while before I did take note of the license plate on the mayor's desk. But once I saw that, and saw that the license plate had 6 digits, which is the amount of digits needed for the third floor access, I started to think, maybe the code is on a license plate. DC might stand for District of Columbia, and I do distinctly remember that in the first level is this gas station area where one of the walls has a bunch of license plates on it. So I go down to the gas station, and sure enough, I was right. There is one for the District of Columbia. It has 6 digits. That might be it. There's one problem. The machine for the access of the third floor only inputs numbers, not letters, which the license plate has 2 of. But the machine uses a rotary phone, which does have letters that correspond with numbers. Again, 1 being like ABC, 2 being DEF, and so on. The problem is the rotary machine on the third floor entrance is blank, so you don't know what the letters will be. However, right next to the gas station is a phone booth with a rotary phone in it that doesn't have anything scratched out. So you can use the license plate, you can actually take a picture of objects in the game and bring them up, which is useful, but there are problems with it that I'll get into later. So you can take a picture of the license plate, you can take a picture of the rotary phone by the gas station, you can go up to the access machine, the rotary phone stuff on the third floor, and you input the numbers, you cross-reference what the letter on the license plate is to what number would be on the rotary phone, and after putting it all in and doing it correctly, you're in. That was a puzzle, and I think that was a great puzzle. It had multiple steps, it utilized multiple parts of the environment, it required both analytical thinking, but also a bit of abstract thinking. There were adequate amounts of hints to sort of guide you along, that you still did need to know a bit about the game. You had to know that the license plates could be found in the gas station, and had to notice a phone booth by the gas station. But overall, it was, I think, a great puzzle, and it felt good to be able to solve it. Now, here's a puzzle that I didn't like. In fact, it was a puzzle that ultimately caused me to quit the game because it became such a fucking slog. It's at the third level, this foresty area with a bunch of, white and blue machines everywhere. And you come across this section that's this giant maze. And if you would stop doing homework or jerking off or whatever you're doing right now and look at the screen here, I have drawn a very rough version of what the view is. So it's this giant circle, and in the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, are smaller circles and a circle in the middle. The lowest part of the maze, the southmost part, is where you enter into, and you can exit in the north, the east, and west parts. This scene right here takes place at the top level of a 3-story structure. The middle level enters a maze, and the lowest level enters some teleportation booth that you then teleport to the first level, but I'll get into that later. So let me try to describe what you're likely to do. You go up to it, and you try to enter into the maze because there is an opening at the middle level. That's where you start at. And you walk through, and there's a dead end. So you walk back to the elevator structure, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to the top floor. I want to see what I might be running into. And then you see that's this larger maze. You see that there are you see that there's this little machine in the very center of the platform that with 2 buttons that rotate the whole circle left or right. You notice the smaller circles with either 90-degree angles or obtuse angles. You need to rotate the smaller circles to form a pathway to any of the exits. Sounds simple enough, but there doesn't seem to be a button for that on the top floor. So you press the button again and wait for the elevator to go down to the middle floor. Then you press a lower button again and wait for the elevator to go down to the lowest floor. And you see the teleporter machine that's been used ever more frequently in the game that allows you to teleport between the different levels, which so far there's 3 of. There's a desert level that you start out in. There's this sort of rocky level with a bunch of large industrial machines. And the third level is this forest area with the maze. You enter into the teleporter, and the way you do that is you have to click on a part of it and then move your mouse down to open it up. Then you have to click a button on it and wait a few seconds for a light to emerge from it that showcases what will be teleported. This is the area of effect. This is what you're bringing along with you. Then you have to click the button again after those few seconds because there's no way to speed it up. And I'll admit, this was a cool effect the first few times. Really worn its welcome. For several seconds, the screen will split up into a multitude, I mean like thousands of small colored dots, and sort of disperse. And then, for a few more seconds, the screen will start to collect again as differently colored dots, and once they're all assembled, you'll be in the different level, the different area. So you do that, you go out, and you see that the smaller circular piece on the southmost side is brought along with you. And you can press a button to turn it clockwise or press a different button to turn it counterclockwise. Unless you take a picture of the maze or remember it, you don't know what direction it was initially facing, and there's no way to cross-compare it reasonably with the larger maze while you're in that first level teleported area. So you press a button and let's say you turn it clockwise once. Then you go back down, you open the slot for the teleporter machine, you press the button, you wait for the light to show the area of effect, you press the button again, you wait a few seconds for the screen to disperse into dots, then you wait some more for it to reassemble, then you go to the elevator, you press a button, you go to the middle floor, you press a button again, and wait even longer for it to go to the top floor because it's a longer length of distance from the middle to the top than from the bottom to the middle. You look over at the maze and you see you have turned it incorrectly. So you go back, you press a button on the elevator, you wait to descend to the middle floor, you press a button again, you wait to descend to the lower floor, you go into the teleportation chamber, you open up the slot, you press a button, you wait, you press a button, you wait and wait, then you go out, you press a button. Did I turn it clockwise or counterclockwise? Oh shit. And you wait for the giant piece to slowly turn in the direction. You go back into the teleporter, open it up, press a button, wait, press a button again, wait, go into the elevator, press a button, wait, press a button, wait, look out, you still fucked up, you gotta do it again. Now, are you even sure that the piece can turn in the right way to connect those two spots? I mean, the obtuse piece in it did look like it could reasonably connect one side with another, and then I can easily form a path from there, but it just doesn't seem to be working no matter how much I go down and go up and go down and go up. Well, here's a fun thing. As it turns out, you're actually supposed to go to a different teleporter that also sends you to the first level, and it's a little bit earlier in the third level. It's not a far walk. It's, you know, the very previous puzzle you went through involving these fucking teleporters. You're supposed to go to that teleporter and go in it and use it, and then you're supposed to walk over to the room where the circular piece of the maze is. You walk over there and you go in the chamber like usual, and you press the buttons and you wait. Then you go up and you will notice that the piece used to be this obtuse angle. Now it's a straight line. But you actually chose the wrong piece to turn into a straight line. You need to go back to the previous teleporter from the earlier puzzle and go through that waiting game again to turn it back, and then you need to rotate the whole thing and figure out which one you're supposed to turn into a straight piece, and then figure out which ones you're supposed to, just turn. And you can see how tedious this is. I went out of my way just to describe the steps. It's tedious, it's frustrating, it's made more obtuse, let's say, than needs to be. It's just made worse than it could have been. Now, I'm perfectly fine with not being able to see you rotating the smaller circle while looking at the maze itself. This game is supposed to require you to do a little bit of thought. But rather than this teleporter bullshit, why not just go down to the lowest floor, rotate it there, then go back up and see, and save yourselves so much accumulated minutes, just waiting. And for changing the piece, just have another button for that. It's still going to be the same puzzle. It's still going to have the same blindness to it. It's just going to go by faster. It's just not going to be as tedious. It's just going to, be more fun. And really, that's kind of what it came down to. I was no longer having fun. I was no longer there sitting thinking, alright, could this be a clue to another puzzle? I should probably take a picture of it. Alright, now where reasonably, based on the knowledge of the map I have gained from traversing it, would I need to go to in order to, further progress in the game? It just evolved into, oh, for fuck's sake, it's rotated wrong again? Is there even a right rotation for it? Evidently not. And there sure as shit isn't a hint in the game telling you that you need to go back to a previous teleporter from the previous puzzle and use that to change one of the pieces into a straight line. Don't even for a second think that was something the game even remotely hinted at. It wasn't, and that's where it brings us to the next problem. This game is just hard for the sake of it, and very little thought was put into the idea that people aren't going to go into it knowing exactly what to do. If you compare what I've done with the puzzle that I did like, which utilized evident clues that you still needed to find the meaning of, and still required an understanding of what was in the level, details that you might have looked over previously, but they were still in your mind. And with this maze puzzle, the difference is black and white. One was enjoyable. One led you from place to place, and you were able to, figure it out along the way. You didn't have to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Let's not insinuate that. Optimally, you start the puzzle in the mayor's office. You go over to the gas station. You go over to the rotary phone, and then you go over to the key card. You start in one place, go to a different place, and end finally in a different place. There's no back and forth and guesswork. The maze puzzle combines the tedium that this game suffers from all the waiting. If they could have invested anything into reducing loading times or speeding things up, it would have been money well spent. But unfortunately, it seems they didn't. So all that tedium and just frustration of not knowing what to do. I mean, why stop playing the game? And I thought, alright, I'll just watch the rest of it on YouTube. I was fucking baffled to find out, oh, you're supposed to go back to this previous teleporter and, use that to change what the piece is. It's just a frustrating experience. It's just one that accumulates over time. The first level, it's not that bad. The speed isn't that bad because there's progressively more shortcuts along the way, so you don't feel like you're running back and forth and backing forth for quite as long. And the collision wasn't as bad because it was normally a very open area, so you didn't have very many opportunities to run into anything. But then the second level came, and the whole open area mindset was tossed out the window in favor of just a straight linear path. And it became more boring and more tedious to traverse through the level the further on you go because there's a lot of back and forth to it. And then the third level came after all of that, and the puzzles started becoming incredibly obtuse and utilizing these abhorrent teleporters far, far too much. Like, I get it, they're a mechanic of the game, and they're part of the game's lore, part of its story, and part of the fun is figuring out how to use these strange, surreal, wacky sci-fi machines. But if these machines become less fun to use over time, then emphasizing them for the final level, making them like one of the biggest parts of this puzzle game for the final stretch of the race, is an outright awful idea. I think if, like I said before, they need to realize that people aren't going to go into this game and know exactly what to do. They're going to stumble around a bit. They're going to be looking around, not quite knowing where to go or what to do next a few times. And there might be a little bit of trial and error. And so making sure that the trial and error is minimized and the stumbling around, the tedium of it is lessened, is, I would say, just as integral to making a good puzzle game as making one, that is supposed to rack the player's brain. You have to account very much for the fact that people are going to be completely new to this game, which is going to be every player at some point who plays this game. And if you can make that experience fun, if you can make it fun to not know what you're doing but figure it out over time, then the game's gonna be fun, I think, even if you do know what to do and you know exactly where to go, you know where point A is, you know where point B is, and you know what button you have to press or whatever. You only have to read the notes, you know the numbers by heart. It would still be fun then. And the reason it would still be fun, the reason you keep playing it, is because you had such a stand-up time when you first hopped in and didn't know about this world and didn't know what you were supposed to do. I think an example of this, problem would actually be the very first thing you're supposed to do. You visit this world, you see this house in this picture here, and you can't open it, you can't do anything with it. It seems very prominent, but there's nothing you can really interact with other than a pre-recorded message that doesn't tell you anything, and a letter in the mailbox that also doesn't really tell you anything. So then you look and you see this sort of old-fashioned, old-time western town right next to it. And you walk along, and some of the buildings, one or two of the buildings are open, but they don't have anything in it, and most of them are closed. But there is one building that you go in, and you see this door with a green button by it. And when you click on the door, click on the keypad on the door, the NPC comes up, and he tells you, a few things and asks you to restore the power in the area. That's fine, but the power in the area is on the other side of this, rocky protrusion here. And the way you're supposed to do that is you're supposed to find this room, kind of, I would say, hidden away in his house, that you go in and you go up this elevator and you start up a waterfall that you can then use to force a sort of door blocking the entrance to the other side of the first level open. And then you can wander over and figure out how to turn on the power. But there's nothing to really indicate that. Once I figured it out, everything else sort of fell into place at, some, very easily, some with a bit of difficulty. But before that, I was just running around completely aimless, not knowing what the hell the power thing is even supposed to look like. Is it supposed to be a human power thing? Is it supposed to be an alien power thing? What is it connected to? How do I get to it? Oh, as it turns out, I'm supposed to just open up access to this other side of the map first, and then we can worry about the power thing. That seems like something that would have been nice to mention in, like, maybe an offhand comment if you try to talk to the NPC again, which you can. You can knock on his door like 2 more times and he becomes progressively more irritated by it, which is humorous, but also, not exactly all that helpful because he just reiterates the same thing. Now, for people who would like the game in general to be easier and not just the problems I have, I think a solution would be the character to drop a much bigger hint, but also in a sort of an insulting way, because the character has no problem insulting you, even saying the second time you knock on his door that he's not interested in holding your hand. I think that would have been sort of a good solution, especially for the very first thing you have to do. There it comes, you get the hint, but it also comes with a bit of, loss of pride, a little bit of an insult or a jab for needing it. Overall, I just can't really recommend the game. And I forgot to talk about the photography. Yes, it is a feature that has an excellent idea on paper. These old puzzle games, you'd have to either look through the notes if they provided you with the transcriptions for it, or you'd have to get out a pen and paper and write it down yourself. And this game lets you take a picture with a spacebar. I've taken many scenic vistas, forgetting that the character can't jump. Take a picture with the spacebar, and then you can view the photo later in the game whenever you need to sort of remind you of what you need to do. What the code is, or what the character might have mentioned, and NPC might have mentioned in a written letter that could be valuable information at this time. The problem is, it could be a lot more streamlined. So let's say you walk up to that, top tower, third floor of the tower area with the key card. You've taken a picture of the license plate, you've taken a picture of the rotary phone. What you have to do is stop, press the escape key, click view photos in the menu, then select your photo, try to take it in, you press the escape key or hit back on the menu, then you have to click resume game, and only then can you resume the game. And even the menus are slow. There's a few seconds where it sort of fades in and fades out. It doesn't just jump right to the menu. I think it would have been a lot better if there was a dedicated view photo key. Press T to view your photos, you click one, and then you click escape and you're back in the game. You don't have to go to the menu, just back in the game. You know what the photo is. You don't have any time to forget. Yeah, that could have been made a lot better. The whole game, I think, could have been made a lot better, and it is such a shame because it did seem like a very interesting game. I was actually interested in playing a challenging but fun puzzle game, but unfortunately I will have to wait and look elsewhere. And even worse, it does kind of make me worried about Scorn, because as I mentioned before, the movement in that game is also very similar to Obduction. You can walk, you can not necessarily run, but move faster, and you can't jump or hop down or up ledges. And that game might be made all the worse by the fact there are no NPCs, there are no dialogue, there are creatures out to kill you. That'll just make it more frustrating if the developers aren't apt at making good puzzles. I guess I'll have to wait and see for another puzzle game if there is one out there. So I just thought I'd sort of give this, just make this video, because I really didn't have a good time playing this game, and I wrote a review on Steam. I might as well make a video on it too, where I just rant and rave and ramble about all the problems I have. So until next time, I guess, I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you in a way this game probably couldn't. Take care.